All right, what's going on, Young and Faith? My name is Gary. I'm back with another episode. I'm so excited to have Krisel on the platform. We have Brother Drew, and then we also have Nye, one of our ambassadors. So I'm excited for this conversation on sexual abuse. And really, I know this is going to be a sensitive conversation. So if you have any kids that are watching or near, I would advise you to kind of block them away. And we also want to let you guys know that we are not professionals. Okay, so Krisel is a official lawyer that represents people that have been sexually abused, but she's not a mental health counselor or anything like that. So we are, from the platform itself, we're going to give you resources and connect you with the right people to get help if you're in need for help for mental health or if you have been sexually abused. But we just want to make sure that this is a platform that's safe for you to listen to and provide you with all the wisdom. So Krisel, I want you to just kind of share your background, your family, what's going on in life and everything like that. So.
Sure, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, so thank you for trusting me with this amazing platform to just impact others. I've been a lawyer, like I was saying to Brother Drew earlier, I've been a lawyer for about 9 years now. And I'm a mom of 3 boys. I'm married to my awesome husband. He's a basketball varsity coach. And you know, when I started off as a lawyer, I represented minors who came through the border, unaccompanied minors, so they came without status, like in immigration matters. And most of these minors were either sex trafficked or abused in their home country. So I helped them find a way to stay in the US. So I represented them in immigration matters. So I ended up, after doing that, I started working for a private practice where I specifically represented survivors of sexual abuse. That's all I do. And I'll explain in a little bit, if I'm allowed the time, what that means, what that looks like. But it is in the civil context, so it's not criminal, it's civil. And basically, I still do that now, but now I do that at my own firm. I started my firm about 2 years ago. I wanted to start a trauma-informed firm. I realized a lot of lawyers were interested in these cases just for the money they bring and basically taking into account the bottom dollar. And that's not how I run my firm. I'm very big on helping my clients feel empowered through the process, because anyone who has been victimized this way know that there's a sense of feeling like they lost something, like they gave up power. And I want to help them, of course, with God's help and therapy and familial support. I feel like this process helps empower people. And so that's my goal. That's what I do. And it's a tough job. You know, like I said, I'm a mom of 3 boys, so seeing what goes on out there in the world every day, it's tough to see. But what is rewarding is to see when someone comes in the door, they're one person, they're broken. A lot of the times they're broken, and when the case is over, they're so empowered through the process. Some of my clients have become authors, advocates, or want to be counselors, and it's such a beautiful thing to see how they turn pain into purpose.
I love that. That's awesome. I think what I love about your story, Krisel, is that you're not just a lawyer, you're a pastor through the process. Like, you're pastoring people in behind the scenes, people that have been sexually abused. People are not walking in the doors of the church. So there's a lot. This is a very sensitive topic, and I just thank you for being open. But there's a lot of people that are dealing in silence. They're dealing with this in silence. They don't know that there is help. They don't know that there is resources out there, and they don't even know what the next step looks like. Especially for young kids that are being sexually abused in the home, that are being raped, that are in silence. How do we? You can answer this question, but how can they be able to break that silence or even step up? There is an issue.
So I want to address your question, but before I do, I think it's important to address what is sexual abuse.
Yeah.
One of the common things I'm seeing, especially nowadays, that everything is hyper-sexualized. Social media, kids at school. Like, growing up, I remember just things being different, right? Less things being accessible, less things that are dealing with anything of a sexual nature. So sexual abuse can be defined, and obviously every state has different laws, right? But generally speaking, it is unwanted sexual touching that was without your consent. So you did not consent to it. It could be forced, right? Physically forced, or there could be a threat of bodily harm. And sexual abuse can also be a minor, someone under the age of 18 in Florida. Some states is 16, some states is 18, but we're talking about Florida right now. I want to stick to Florida unless there are any specific questions I can address. A minor who engages in a sexual act with an adult, and even if they consent, And I say consent in quotation marks because a minor cannot consent.
Mm.
They can be compliant, they can physically go through the motions without being forced or threatened, like I mentioned the two earlier, but that doesn't mean that it's consensual. I'll give you an example of what I see so often, and a lot of female or male students think it's okay, and that is a student having a sexual relationship with a teacher. That is sexual abuse. That is not okay. Even in states where the age of consent is 16, for instance, I still believe that's not okay, and I still have brought cases for that because there is an authority. This is an authority figure that's taking advantage of his or her position, and it's not okay. It shouldn't be like that. There shouldn't be any sense of authority in a relationship. You should both be in an equal playing field. So now that I define what sexual abuse is, because I feel like we need to know what that is. What does that look like? Some people, even as adults now, are sexually abused, and they're like, I had no idea. You know, I met a woman the other day who met her husband when she was 13 and he was 30 years old.
Wow.
She married him and they got a divorce, and you know, it was hard for her to understand that she was victimized in this way, because you felt like, oh, that's my choice. I was able to make the choice. You were 13. Like, that's not okay. So please understand what sexual abuse is. If you still have questions, and obviously it can look very different in every scenario. So I haven't covered all the scenarios, but I'm just generally, based on our audience, or who I think our audience to be, I'm addressing it. But with that said, to answer your question, what can be done? The first thing is contact law enforcement if you're in physical danger. I know that's a hard thing to do, but I'm going to say that across the board. Contact law enforcement, 911. If you disclose the incident to a therapist or a teacher, they're what's called mandated reporters. So they're gonna automatically contact Child Protective Services if you're a minor, DCF. Definitely speak to a trusted adult, someone you can trust that you feel that has your best interest in mind. Just so you know, once, and this is not to discourage you from saying it, but once you do tell a teacher or a therapist or even a doctor, they have to disclose it. And so understand that you're going to go through a process after disclosing it. And that's not necessarily a negative thing, because the sooner you go through that process, the sooner you could start to heal. I feel the scary thing is when people try to sweep it under the rug like nothing happened, or it wasn't that serious, or I'm imagining things, or I put myself in that situation. No, it's not your fault if you were sexually abused. I'll always say that. Most people will say, well, why were you there that day? Why were you wearing that? Does not matter. It does not matter. And so to answer your question, you could, if you know someone who's being sexually abused, who's a minor, or you yourself, you can call the abuse hotline from DCF. You could Google that number. You could contact law enforcement. Tell a school counselor, a teacher, a doctor, especially if your life is in danger, or tell a trusted adult. So that's, I think at a minimum, those are the resources that are out there.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think there's a lot of people that have been sexually abused, but they don't even know it. So like a kid, I see it a lot, of students that, they're probably 16 and they're talking to a 23-year-old, 24-year-old, and they think that's okay. Like, oh, I like older men. And, really the older person in that relationship is taking advantage. They're taking advantage of that child, So I think it's also going on with culture, where culture is the big influence, where they're telling us this is okay.
Exactly. Through
music, through Instagram, through TV shows, they're using that as a tool to push that off. And even pornography, I would even say that's a huge one too. I think there was a case where there was a minor on there. How did a minor get on, Pornhub? Who knows, So there's a lot of things that are going on with that. That's pretty crazy, Did you have something to say?
Like, when it comes to sexual abuse, like when, you want to start looking at some signs, I would say like with children, for instance, things like, I would say like wetting the bed is a big sign. So if you notice your kid or brother or sister, with things like that, isolation, wetting the bed, those are some certain signs of trauma. And when molestation happens, man, it's an embarrassing feeling. You know what I'm saying? And so, that's why we suppress it. And a lot of times, like especially with boys, how it happens. Like in my case, it happened, you know what I'm saying? It starts off with wrestling, horse playing, you know what I'm saying? And then it gets to, you know, touchy-feely, and then it gets to, well, after it's all said and done, you get these gifts of these hush gifts. Hey man, I'll give you this and that, just don't say nothing, you know. And then in me and my wife's case, like both of our situations were brushed under the rug. You know what I'm saying? They were never dealt with. You know what I mean? And so with that, it's like, you know, for me, like I kind of grew up like, man, not just having that embarrassment, but then, you know, nobody did nothing about it. So you're just kind of feeling like, well, all right, you know. But then for me, it kind of got to the point where I was like, now I got a chip on my shoulder. You know what I'm saying? And I like, it led me to being like, you know, I'll never be that, and I'll never let anyone embarrass me like that again. You know what I'm saying? I'll never let anything make me look foolish or anything like that again. And so like, man, I grew up angry, and I grew up kind of like feeling like, well, shoot, you know, like my own family didn't do nothing. You know, maybe they don't care, you know, and then fast forward years later, come to find out, you know, the family member who did it to me, it also happened to him. And the one who did it to him, it happened to him. So it's just like you got generations of it happening, and it's just like, man, like it at all costs it needs to be prevented. You know what I mean? And it's crazy because it's like you can't even really play with some of your own family members nowadays, because it's never from a stranger. It's from someone within the family or a friend of the family. That's how it always is. You know, and it happens a lot to the lower middle class, you know, families. You know, like I think I read a statistic the other day that it's 1 in every 6 boys and 1 in every 4 girls that go through this. And the more I talk to men and I share my experience, the more and more men come out and they're like, yo, I dealt with that too, man. And it's wild, bro. It's wild.
Krisel, like how many cases could you say that you have dealt with boys that have been sexually abused?
You know, I was actually going to say that there's a misconception or an idea that this is a problem that mostly females experience, especially after the Me Too movement. But I can say that if I take a snapshot of all the cases I've dealt with, it would be 50-50. And you brought up a good point, because of, especially in our cultures, like, you know, the Hispanic culture or the Spanish-speaking community, because of what is referred to as like machismo and like just men having to be men, it's very hard for boys and then who become men, especially, to admit these things. I got a case the other day where the mom reached out to me. She found out her son was sexually abused by a teacher at a public school in Miami-Dade, and she said, it took me a year to call you because I can't tell people this happened to my son. And it made me sad because he had no control over what happened to him. It wasn't his fault. This was something that happened to him. I always liken it to, like, if God forbid I get into a car accident right now as I leave here, I'd have no problem calling you and saying, oh my God, I just got in a car accident. I'm about to sue the brakes off this guy, because that's the first thing I think about as a lawyer. Like, it's easy. But if something happened to me of that nature, a sexual assault, I'm not just sitting here calling people saying, oh my God, this just happened to me. After the Me Too movement, it was normalized a bit more because there's strength in numbers. People felt empowered. Oh, I'm not the only one. I can talk about this. I wasn't imagining it. But with men, there's still that stigma where it's really hard to talk about. So I commend you to talking about it and bringing awareness and being strong. You're not letting your strength and your identity be robbed by what that person did to you, you know. And that takes healing. That takes also, you know, for you to let go of that embarrassment, like you said, or shame. Because in some instances, what I do want to say, and I feel like it's important to always say, is some of the people hearing us right now may say, well, I participated in it. Like, I didn't stop the person. Sometimes because you said it's a family member or a known person, there's that grooming process, which is, you mentioned the wrestling, the gift giving, right? The, you know, favoritism, like, oh, you're my favorite, you know. So by the time a person is sexually abused, they like their abuser. Like they're paying attention. What kid doesn't like getting gifts? What parent doesn't like when their kids are recognized and praised for how good they are at a sport or how talented they are? So by the time the abuser does his or her deed, based on selfish and like horrible desires, the child likes their abuser. So there's that disconnect. So they participate in the abuse. Then there's the added layer of the fact that we're made of nerve endings. Like I touch myself here, I feel it, right? You touch yourself or someone touches you in certain places, you're going to have a reaction, whether it's a good one or a bad one. Sometimes when survivors of sexual abuse go through the sexual abuse, it feels a certain way that's not unpleasant necessarily. Sometimes there are other instances, but I'm mentioning. So that can be another layer of, well, I participated in it. I didn't say no. I kind of liked it. Oh my gosh. And so that becomes very hard for someone to understand, like, I was wronged. I had no control over what happened to me. I'm not at fault. And so it's very important people recognize, like, this is something that happened to you, and you deserve justice. And there's different forms of getting justice, which, like I said, we can get into that in a little bit whenever we get into it and it flows. But I just felt like the need to address that because I've seen so many times there's a sense of shame, and there should not be a sense of shame, and it's sad. Because like you said, it perpetuated. The person who did it to you, it was done to that person. It's a cycle. It's a horrible cycle.
I think, Brother, you could probably relate to this, but something that's not dealt with right away as a child, where you didn't even know, but maybe there's a part of you that was like, man, I don't even want to say anything, is now coming up in adult life, where now it's like coming in with anger. You know, I know you were a part of before you got into Christ, you know, you were into the gang life and all that. So like, with not dealing with sons then, and now having that deal with it now, how did you go through that, and how did that work out with you?
Yeah. So, the dude that did what he did, right? He was a family member, and he was also a gang member. So when I was a boy, you know, I idolized this dude. I was like, man, like, you know, I see him out there, you know, shaking up, and you know, it's crazy how fast forward some years later, I'd be part of the same organization. And so how did I deal with it? So, you know, I got to a point in my walk, and this is probably 3 years into my walk with Christ. I got to a point where my walk got kind of stale. And, you know, in those stale moments in your walk, you know, you really want to start asking God, okay, God, like, I might not be feeling so on fire. What's going on? Like, what should I be learning, you know, at this time? And what is it that I'm not hearing? What is it that I'm not seeing? And God led me to forgiveness. So went down the rabbit hole of scripture, started studying all about forgiveness, what forgiveness looks like biblically, scripturally, and stuff like that. And it came to me like, man, I still got that chip on my shoulder. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, you know what? I need to forgive this dude, not for him, but for me, because I'm like, God, like, I want to go further with you, but I know that there's something within me that's holding me back to fully, like, because if I want to talk to people about, you know what I'm saying, that freeing of pain and stuff like that, man, this is something I got to do. You know what I mean? And so, so this family member, right, fast forward some years later, he winds up becoming, he goes through a bunch of stuff, right? He becomes a believer, right, which is crazy. And so in this time where I'm studying up on forgiveness and all that, face to face, I can say we haven't had this conversation. But I managed to text him, right? And, you know, he kind of gave me some, oh, I've been forgiven, I don't need your forgiveness and this and that. And I was like, well, hey, it's not for you, it's for me, you know, because I need to let you know. And then recently, because we still talk to this day, every now and then he'll be like, hey, man, I'm sorry I messed up your life. And I'm like, hey, I'm sorry that what happened to you too. you know, because you know what, this is part of the story, you know, and I'm able to forgive him for that, you know, because it happened to him too. And it's been freeing, you know, not to hold on to that, because man, I was angry for years, and I just felt like, man, like I'll never let nobody disrespect me, embarrass me. But man, like that forgiveness, bro, was so freeing, man. And to let people know that, hey man, there is healing in Jesus, bro. You really can heal from it, man. And you gotta forgive them, man. I mean, as twisted as it may seem, because of an act may be so horrible, you know, I know there's things I need forgiveness for. And the Bible says, man, if you can't forgive, God ain't gonna forgive you. You know what I'm saying? So I got to that point of forgiveness, man. And, you know, like I said, it was freeing, bro.
I really want to hit that. Just like, how do you start the healing process? I mean, people that dealt with this 20 years ago haven't even spoke about it, said a word. You know, how do you start healing? How do you bring it up, you know, in faith? Because you know, for us, we're believers, you know, right? So we know that we can experience a true healing through Jesus, right? Through our faith, you know, but I'm also aware that there's a lot of people that don't know Jesus.
Yeah.
So they're hurting, they're broken. And you probably speak into this, Krisel, about, you know, you're dealing with clients all the time, and I'm pretty sure like there are some boundaries with faith and work and all that. So how do you respond to that? How do you work through that as a believer?
Yeah, it's hard because it's like I want to pray for everybody, and I do in my own time sometimes, and sometimes I outwardly did it recently to that mom I mentioned earlier, who said it took her a year to contact me about her son. But it's hard because it's like you want better, you want like more for them, and they're not at that point where they can see that, the things you just mentioned regarding healing in Christ and all that. But I always say a few things. I say to them, one, there's healing in practical, you know, I do believe in therapy. I believe that God placed doctors in the world to like help us and things like that. So I always say therapy is important, to go to therapy to learn to cope with the effects of the abuse, whether it's post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, whatever other commonality amongst people who have been sexually abused. I also say if you're able to pursue some sort of criminal action by reporting what happened to you, there's also healing in that and getting that form of justice where the person is punished by way of their freedom as a result of the sexual abuse. And I also say what I do, and I guess this is a perfect time to get into a little bit about what I do, because like I said, I feel like it is empowering, and that is through the civil process. And so criminal is for punishment, civil is for compensation or money. So something horrible happened to you. I'll give you an example. The example I mentioned with the child and being abused by a teacher, something happened at the school. If the school had reason to know that this was a risk or foreseeable, or that they had reason to know that this teacher was going around being inappropriate with students and the school failed to do anything, this civil process is for that. You can go after the school and say, look, you guys need to be held accountable for failing to protect me. As parents, if I don't get my kids an education, like take them to school, most people don't have the ability to homeschool or the means, but if you don't get your child an education, you get in trouble. You legally have to make sure your child gets an education. And so you're placing your child within the care of the school. And if the school doesn't do what it's supposed to do, the school by way of its officials, they should be held responsible. And so that's where I come in. That's where I sue the school board, or, fill in the blank, sue a hospital if there was an abuse that occurred in a hospital, or whatever entity or institution where the abuse occurred, we sue them for compensation for the client. That compensation helps them with therapy. It helps them with medical care if there was some sort of serious injury as a result of the abuse. It helps them get an education if they somehow, had a client who dropped out of high school after being assaulted by a fellow student. The school did nothing. They didn't pay attention to her. It was against Palm Beach County. And she now has enough money to go pursue her GED to go to nursing school, which is what she wanted to do, even though she had to drop out and didn't graduate with her peers. So Some people dumb down the process and say, oh, you're just suing people for money. Well, unfortunately, apart from the criminal, with someone's freedom, the only thing that hurts these institutions is where with money, and that's the only way you can truly make a difference. Apart from the fact that in the criminal realm, it is such a high standard of proof. I'm sure you guys have watched like law shows and you hear beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm sure most people have heard that. That's a very high standard in a criminal case. And most sexual assaults are one person's word against another because they happen in private, right? Very few happen openly with witnesses. With that said, a lot of these cases don't get prosecuted criminally. And so that leaves the civil aspect, and that helps people feel empowered and feel like someone believes me and someone did something for me. It's really more than just about the money, but the process is for money when you break it down from a legal perspective. And so I hope that explains a little bit more about what I do. Some people confuse what I do with law enforcement. I'm not law enforcement. I'm not a prosecutor. I'm a lawyer in the civil realm for civil cases.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I think like a lot of people, they're like, oh, that's greed. And it's really not. It's like, I was abused. I went through all this trauma. I missed out on opportunities. Now this is my time to get justice for myself and try to live my life.
Yeah, 100%. And the whole thing in the legal world is, in a civil claim, you're trying to make the person whole. You're making them whole. Like you get, you slip and fall right there. You could sue. You break a leg. You could sue what your leg is worth. If you worked in hard labor, you can sue. What does that mean for you? Anyone who has been victimized this way, know they can never be made whole again, right? So it's not greed. No, the person, I'm sure, if you say, look, you could either get all this money or this never happened to you, I'm sure they would choose the latter. They would choose it. I hope this never happened to me to begin with. No one is thinking, oh, I'm gonna get rich off of this. That's not what none of my clients are doing this for the money. They're doing this for empowerment, justice, to have their voices be heard, and to make change, for accountability. There have been many times that institutions change their regulations as a result of what I do, because I bring awareness, because we didn't sweep it under the rug, because we did something. Unfortunately, in many instances, I have clients similar to your situation where the family members did nothing. So you lose something, you lose a piece of yourself. You feel like you don't matter. And so when you're able to get justice in this way, you get so much back. I hope people see how genuine I am when I talk about this, because I've seen it play out, and there's nothing like it. And so to answer your question, to sum up everything, I say to someone who's like not in Christ and not trying to receive healing from the spiritual aspect, is therapy, familial support, and friendships, people you trust to talk about what you're feeling, to feel validated, and the criminal process, if it's available. If it happened 20 years ago, that's not going to be very possible. They barely prosecute cases that happened weeks ago. They're not, so it's not meant to discourage anybody. I recommend you can still report it, with the understanding that you have no control over the criminal process. But you do have control over the civil process, and that's where the empowerment comes from. That's where I say healing is a journey, and you could anyone who's been through this can probably say it. You're not just going to heal like that. It's going to take working on it and steps. So imagine it as a ladder. The civil process is just one step in the ladder. One step. The criminal, one step. Therapy is one step. Your relationship with God is another step.
What are some resources as well that are available for people that are going through the situation? I know there's hotlines, there's, like I said, they can talk to someone, there's guidance counselor at the school. What are some practical things they can continue to do?
Definitely, I would say you're welcome to reach out to me,
Krisel
Mcswenney at Mcswenney Law Firm. Even if you say, hey, there was no institution involved, I just want to know what my legal options are, please feel free to reach out to me. If there was an institution involved, we'll talk about, and it's confidential and free of charge. I recommend if you're a minor, you involve one of your parents or guardian. I highly recommend that. If the abuse is occurring in a home, or it is a parent, or you cannot trust your parents, definitely call law enforcement first. I don't want to be the first person you reach out to, but definitely get to a safe place. That's the main thing. I did hear about something recently about an app I don't know if anybody knows, it's called Circle, there's a Circle app, it's for adults, but then they have an app where it's like community counseling or something like that, but for minors. I thought that was really good because sometimes it's just good to hear other people may have gone through what you have gone through and can relate, and you can have somebody to talk to. I don't know the name of the app right now. We could find out and
We'll put it
somehow
up. We'll
publish
put it
it
up.
later. But it's an app, like a community type of counseling app, where there's a facilitator, a person there, a professional there, and then there's just, minors. I know this app is specifically for minors, just talking about their experiences, their hardships, what they're dealing with. I feel like that's empowering
Yeah.
also, to know, hey, I'm not the only one, I'm not crazy, I'm not the only one dealing with this. Like I said, the abuse hotline, I think those are the main resources. I don't wanna overwhelm people with like information, but basically those are like the main, most important ones.
Yeah.
The ones I mentioned earlier.
Those are practical things. I think the time is now, if you have been through a situation, don't be afraid to talk. Don't be afraid to share your voice, because you find healing when you open up. We were never created to hoard things to ourselves. God didn't create us to be by ourselves, to, be in silence. He called us to be in community, when things do happen. We live in a fallen world. Things happen all the time. This is a wicked world. We deal with this all the time. And God has provided people in our circle, and He will provide people to lead us to the right path and share life with us. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I want to transition the conversation to purity. Really just practical things, and I think, I know that, again, culture influences out there that are, influencing negatively on the younger generation, right? Teenagers, through the music, through celebrities, I don't care what dissing all of them, Ice Spice, all those celebrities that are out there, not living a holy life, right? Where they're teaching young girls, teaching young men, this is how you should look like, this is how you should dress like, this is how you should talk like, this is who you should sleep with. It's okay to sleep with, 6 partners, it's okay to test it out, explore, but I want to circle it back. So what does God have to say about that? And what does modesty mean? So now I want to open up with you and kind of just, have you kind of, speak on what's some things you see around high school. I know you're a high schooler now, you're a senior, share some things on that and what you feel like is wrong around, so.
I feel like nowadays kids just think it's okay to, sleep with a bunch of people, dress how they want to dress, do all these things, have no respect for themselves, in a way. And that's just, I feel like it's all the way wrong because, especially with girls, if they expect respect from, people, they expect respect from men and all these things, but it's if you can't really respect yourself, you can't expect respect from other people, People are not going to respect you if you're not respecting yourself. And especially with the topic about sleeping around and doing all these things, I feel like the reason that God wants you to protect you from those things is because if you go sleep around with many people, that's a spiritual thing. You're going to get, you're going to get spiritual consequences from sleeping around from so many people because if you sleep around with this guy and this guy has an anger issue problem, you're going to get that anger issue problem because now you become one with that person. And if you sleep around with many people, you're going to get character traits of that person. So, and especially with modesty, we're called to be modest just to show respect for ourselves. It's not necessarily a outward thing, but you have to, how to explain this? It's the way you respect yourself from the inside to not want to present yourself that way outwardly.
That's good. You want to comment on that?
I just have to say, obviously growing up, I'm 36, so I'm much older. I'm much older than you, but things are different now. I definitely see some of what you're saying regarding just how open people are now about just sexuality and sex and all these things. And I definitely agree with your modesty comment. It's not so much, oh, can I wear my skirt up to here or here? It's more if you respect yourself, what are you putting out to the world? I said earlier that someone who sexually assaulted, it's never their fault, and I stand by that. However, And it's not even a however, it's more like, but you need to think about the fact that I've seen situations where people are in a social setting and things are happening around them that they cannot control and they cannot stop. And so although it's not their fault that it's happening, if you engage in certain acts, if you go certain places where you know these things are happening, you may not be able to control what happens that night, that day. And so some people, I hear some people when they say, well, yeah, I did it, but I didn't want to do it, I just froze. I know most people, and I want to address that a little bit. Most people have heard of fight or flight, right? Those are your responses if you're in a situation where you fear for your life. That's instinctual, because we're animals. We are animals. We're the more sophisticated kind sometimes, but we're animals basically. So there's also a freeze that people don't talk about. It's like when animals play dead, like possums, they just play dead. A lot of people who are sexually abused freeze and they don't understand it. I had a case once involving a cop, and it was at a spa. She was at the massage table, the masseuse was sexually assaulting her. Her holster was like right on the chair, like next to her. She was a cop, she's trained to like be in altercations. She froze. She was so mad at herself, she could not believe it. She was in tears because she froze. And it's because it's an instinctual thing. You fear for your life. Okay, how can I stay alive in this very moment? That could mean fleeing out the door. That can mean fighting. That can mean freezing. With that said, I have a lot of people who, like, especially with fraternity parties, they go to a fraternity party, we all know what happens there. There's a lot of drinking, and where there's a lot of drinking, there are a lot of issues. Like this, people lose their common sense. So you go to a place, it's not your fault it happened. Please, I hope nobody misconstrues what I'm saying, because that's not what I'm saying, but you have now a lack of control with your surroundings. And if somebody is doing something to you that you don't want, and you freeze because instinctually, it's instinct, it means you're not thinking. If you do something instinctually, you're not processing what you're doing, your brain just tells you what to do, and your body reacts. If you instinctually freeze, you're unfortunately putting in yourself at that, you're allowing yourself to remain instinctually in that situation where you can be sexually abused or sexually assaulted. So with that said, how I'm tying this into what you're saying is not being in the wrong types of places, or not allowing the narrative of the world, not adopting the narrative of the world to be like, it's okay if I'm like partying or sleeping around, because what if you change your mind? I've also had cases where someone's in the middle of an act and they change their mind and they can't get out of it. And you can withdraw consent at any point. I want people to understand that. You could literally be in the middle of an act and withdraw consent at any point, and you should be able to, you should be able to, but sometimes you can't. Once you're in it, it's hard to get out of it if the other person is violent, or if the other person doesn't care, or if the other person's intoxicated and they're just, they're not able to see straight. So my point is, going to what you were saying about respecting yourselves, is also a situation where you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you lack control. But it's never that it's okay for you to be sexually assaulted because you're there. I'm not saying that. I hope that's clear from what I'm saying. I really hope it's clear. Because I want to make sure nobody thinks I'm saying it's their fault, because it's not. It's not. But it's just to be careful. There's so much out there. Same thing like if you go out with girlfriends or female friends and you're drinking from a drink that's not yours. Like there's certain precautionary measures you can take in life. That's one of them. Like trying to be, not be at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, I just think it goes back to choices. We all have a choice, and 100%. Like anyone that's listening, it wasn't your fault. No one wants to be in that situation.
No, not at all. Not at
No
all.
one. But where you place yourself is really important. So if you decide to go to that party, you know there's going to be drinking involved. There's not people that are not living their right life. What do you think is going to happen? You're going to be around negative influences, or if you're around the wrong people, the wrong friend groups, this is how you're going to become like. It's the same thing. So it's kind of like we have to set boundaries, which is, we're going to tie that in, setting healthy boundaries in life, because I think a lot of us think boundaries is a fun killer when it's a guardrail for your life. Boundaries protect us from getting into situations that are harmful for us. And I think even with our faith, right? God doesn't tell us to not do something just because he doesn't want us to have fun. He's telling us this because he wants to protect, we're his kids. He's our father, right? So he cares for us, and he doesn't want us as kids to get hurt, you know? So in the same way, we have to be like, man, boundaries are not just to stop me from having fun, but it's to keep me safe, you know? But I want every student to know that, you know, you're gonna have peer pressure, you're gonna have people that tell you to go this route, you're gonna have negative influences, but learning to stand firm in who you are and not follow the crowd, but also, you know, following God and following the right people is gonna help you make right decisions, you know, because boundaries are not to just, you know, remove the fun out of your life, because you got a whole life to live, you know. We're all believers, we have fun every single day. There's a way to have fun. You don't have to go to parties, you don't have to smoke, you don't have to drink to have fun.
That's right.
You know, that's unreal. Brother Joe, I know you got something to say on that, so I want to tie it back with you. So.
Yeah, so I want to share with y'all about my cousin Gracie, man. She passed away at the age of 22. And her life, man, like her parents were both addicts. It almost looked like, man, she didn't have a hope in the world, man, because it started so young. And, you know, the abuser who abused me also abused her. You know, we were the 2 out of the 4 cousins that were abused. You know, the other 2, they would run and tell, but, you know, me and Gracie, you know, kind of held things under. And so with that, you know what I'm saying, and also the men that her mother chose to be with and to be around, mix that with drugs, you know what I'm saying, it's a recipe for disaster. And so my cousin Gracie started young, man, sneaking out the house, you know, wanted to have fun. You know, grandma said, you know, she tried to set a time to come in the house. But like I said, Gracie would sneak out and, you know, go be with older men. And eventually, man, it got to the point where she got addicted to drugs. And, you know, she was trying to have fun. And then come to find out 2 weeks before she passed, man, she was HIV positive. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's what's scary, man, because it's like, yo, you think, you know, being young, you're full of hormones, you're going crazy, but you really got to slow it down, think before you act, because, man, there's stuff that will stick with you for life and will end your life, you know. And word got around that, you know, the streets knew who Gracie was, you know, and it's sad, you know, when people be like, oh, you know, your cousin's out here hoeing, you know, she's making money for it, you know what I'm saying? Even her own parents at one time was like, oh yeah, you know, she's in the back getting money. And that's how it was. And it was just like, man, it's crazy, man. And, you know, that's why it's so important, man, that we got to warn these young women to really value themselves, man. Regardless of where you come from, you know, your home situation, man, listen, you can overcome that. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to live that life, man. Listen, purity is a beautiful thing, man. Marriage is a beautiful thing. You know, you hear the youngins today like, oh, marriage is a piece of paper. No, man, listen, when it comes to a biblical marriage, man, that is so beautiful, man. You know what I'm saying? You know, really, really study up on it, man, and hold that value, because you're worth it. You know what I'm saying? Young lady, you're worth it. Young man, you're worth it.
So good.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and even for like men, like what can you say for men that, you know, can't wait to get another knock on their belt, you know, like you would say, like what are some things that we can say to the men out there?
Zip it up. No. But you know, man, you think about the mindset of a young man. Like when you get older, you think about like, what was the point? There was no emotion involved. Like we say, it's just another notch under the belt, man. But it's just like, you never know what the other individual might have had going on in here or up in here. Maybe they really thought, you know what I'm saying? And then you dogged them. Now you just put harm on someone else. You put emotional harm on someone else. You know what I'm saying? Just because you wanted to get yours off. You know what I'm saying? And so for you young men, like, man, you need to tighten up, man, because listen, a real man, it ain't that chunk of flesh dangling between your legs, bro. That ain't what make you a man, bro. Like, what make you a man is falling in line with what the scripture says, bro. That's you know what I'm saying, looking after your woman, looking after your children, not having a bunch of babies in different households and thinking you God's gift to women. No, bro, like, man, it takes a lot to be a real solid man. You know, and a man is not having all these notches under his belt, man. You know, it's the husband to one wife. You know what I'm saying? And it's not like, you know, you ain't doing no pimping because you got all these females around you, bro. Like, the Bible calls you a whoremonger. You know what I'm saying? And you play around with that, man. Listen, men get diseases too. You will get something that you can't get rid of, bro. And I know men that have died of AIDS because they thought they were God's gift to women. And they was just sleeping around with everything. And that type of lifestyle took his life. So it's just like, man, you playing with fire, man, when you out here spilling seed everywhere. And you really got to be careful, man.
And that even goes to like leadership in the Bible. It's like, as men, we are called to lead. We're called to lead the way, and it's sad sometimes when you do see men that are not even leading correctly. You know the right thing to do, but you want to be like culture. You want to be like a gangster. You want to be like a rapper out here. You know, and I know I talked about this a little bit about like how there are effects. When you don't have a father president, when you don't have a male figure president in the household, how that kind of influence you to make poor decisions in dating or in period, So, absolutely. What are some things you wanted to share on that?
I feel like it's more prone to a woman to, be hypersexual, to be more sexually active with multiple men when they don't have a father figure in their home, because they want that validation from men that they didn't get from their father, And I feel like that's just such a big problem nowadays, because there's not a lot of men who actually follow God and actually are, leaders that they're supposed to be, because men are supposed to be the leader of the household, but instead, they're absent, they're doing whatever they want to do. You see them out with a lot of, with multiple women, you see them out like smoking, doing all these things. Their kids are going to reflect their father. Their kids are going to, because it's naturally, a kid is going to reflect their parents. Whatever their parents do, the kid is going to adapt to that way. And I just feel like that's a really big problem nowadays, is when there's not a father figure in the home,
Can I say something?
Yes.
I agree with that. And I also think that even if whoever's watching, you're feeling like, well, I've never had a good example set for me, I don't know what that looks like, well, then you be that person.
That's right.
I mean, you could break the cycle. A lot of Christians say, oh, there's generational curses, and I'm not going to sit here and deny that there are, which is basically something that goes from generation to generation as like a curse. But a lot of it is like what you said, we follow what our parents do, right? Even if our parents say don't curse and they curse, what are we going to start doing? We're going to start cursing, right? So it's like that nature versus nurture, where you're going to adopt the characteristics of the people around you. You're going to grow up seeing something, you're going to kind of become that. It can be two ways. You could either say, I never want to be like that, and live your life trying not to be that, which that's not God's will for your life. Or you can just be like that because you're like, well, this is the way to be. I've never had a father figure, so I'm not going to be present in my kids' lives. But, you watching this now, you have a decision to make. You're like at that fork in the road. Like, now you know better. Now you've heard something different. Now you see a different, what's the word I'm looking for? Example of what should be as a man and as a woman. As a woman, to be modest, as a man to be a leader, right? I think that's like the ultimate thing we're saying here. And as women, you can be a leader as well. I'm not downplaying the role of women, definitely not. But I feel like now you know better, make that choice for you and your family and future generations. Like you could literally be the difference between, you know, your family continuing generations down the line to be in this horrible cycle, or you breaking the cycle right now. And it'll be hard, and it won't come without challenges. It'll be like a roller coaster. But if you are resolute, or you've said, listen, I don't want this to continue, then you can stop that. I feel like you know, your family, you can talk about that, especially with the examples you've given me. You talked about your cousin Gracie, which I'm so sorry to hear. I can't even imagine the pain she went through daily before her passing. But like, you spoke about your uncle, was it? Or cousin, the man who unfortunately victimized you and her. And it's like, there was this cycle, and you decided to break that cycle. And it's gonna affect your kids and your kids' kids. And that is a beautiful thing to see, right? You don't have to, just because you say, well, I didn't have a good father figure. You don't have to live in that. You get to a certain age where fine, that affected you, but you can move past that, and you should. You know, and from a practical perspective, you know, somebody may say, well, I don't even know how to start. Well, start looking at the word. If you're a Christian, we should be literally reading the word every day because it has answers. Look at how to model Jesus. That's it, right? Look at how to model Jesus. He was a great leader. He was patient, kind, loving, always prayed, was always dependent on God's next word, next move. Like, try to model that if you have no idea, right? And find practical ways to avoid continuing to fall in that cycle. If you have friends that are bringing the worst out of you, I'm sorry, but you may have to separate from them for a while until you're strong enough to bring them to the better side, right? Or to the good side, right? Mm-hmm. So there's practical things you can do, and I can't even get into them now because it's probably like a whole list we could make, and that could be a whole different episode. Yeah. But yeah, make a decision now. It's like you said, the time is now. Earlier you said that, and I love that. Mm-hmm. The time is now. Break that cycle. You don't have to live in that. It doesn't have to define you. And I always say, even with sexual abuse, with my clients, like, and I didn't coin this term, like somebody said it, but I love it. But it's like, sexual abuse or being victimized this way doesn't define you. It redefines your life. It shouldn't define your life, but it redefines it. The way you move now will be different, but it doesn't define you. You're not a victim. I always say I represent survivors of sexual abuse. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a difference, and there's power in that. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, when I hear you guys talking about breaking cycles, you know, I even look at my family. Like, there's a big thing in my family where, you know, my aunt went through it. You know, they went through, you know, losing a husband. You know, not in death, but it's pretty much like the whole concept in the family was like, no one can keep a husband, no one can keep a wife, no one can get married, have a healthy marriage. So everyone started believing that. Everyone believed that. And I don't think it was a curse. I just think that they believed it. Yes. They believed it. So when you believe something, you think that's the truth, that's how you're going to react and respond to that. You know, so I'm hearing all this stuff. You know, I hear my mom talking about it. I'm like, that's not going to be my life. I can't accept that. I cannot accept, you know, I'm sorry for what happened to you guys. I'm praying that you find healing in that. But I know that God doesn't want that for my life. God knows that He wants every generation to get better. You know what I mean? So the past is the past, but there's a future. You know, so I'm even praying for myself, for my future wife, for my future kids, that I can be the best father. I don't have to be like my dad. I don't have to be like what he did. You know, I don't have to do what he modeled or whatever. But like, I want to be better. You know, and I want, like you said, like, you don't have to accept where you're at. Some people accept it. They accept what happened. They accept their circumstance. You can rewrite your story. You can rewrite everything that happened to you. Like, God is always rewriting stories. It's not a period. It's always a comma, right? He is always rewriting something. He's always changing stories. I love how, like, even with Lazarus, right, in the Bible, how everyone thought Lazarus was dead, right? And people thought that was the end. And then Jesus shows up, not on their time, but on His time, right? He comes through. He raises up from the dead, right? And seeing that story, brought people so much faith because it was like, that's real, you know? So the same way where Lazarus was dead and brought back to life, I want that for my life. I want that for people watching. Like, you could have a Lazarus story where you were dead, your situation was dead, it was finished, but God said, no, I'm gonna keep you alive, I'm gonna keep you going, you know, and you're holding your pen, you know. There's a couple other things that I want to talk about that's really important, but I want to hit on social media. I think social media can be a big thing. Me going through middle school, since I was in 6th grade, you know, Snapchat, Kick, nobody remembers Kick. I don't know who remembers Kick. Kick was the bang back then, you know, a couple years ago.
We had an AOL chat line.
Huh?
You remember
We
that?
had dialogue. We listen to me.
That's
Things
way
are so
before y'all
different now.
time, boy.
For real.
Yeah, I won't be in that.
Well, MySpace, mi gente.
But you know, there's a lot of kids that are making poor choices. You know, as a teacher inside of schools as well, and some of the teacher, I'm seeing a lot of things that happen. You know, through, you know, even through the phone. You know, like someone sending news, someone sending inappropriate pictures. You know, and that lives on forever. You know, I remember I was in a bus one time, and then someone airdropped, you know, a video of a sexual video of somebody. You know, that girl was depressed, wanted to kill herself, you know, over something that happened to her a couple weeks ago, you know, and now that's out. People see it. And how, like, again, it goes back to the choices, you know, consequences, you know, like, do you really want to be labeled as that? Do you really want people to know you as that? You know, but I just really want everyone to know that there's just so much value that you have, like, you're worth it. Like, you never see diamonds on the street, right? Because they're rare, right? Diamonds are, you can't find a diamond on the street. And I want people to have kind of see their life like that, see yourself as that. You're a diamond, you're beautiful, you're handsome. Respect yourself, value yourself, you know. But Krisel, I want you to share, like, what are some boundaries we can keep on social media? How can we keep it modest? What are some things that we can do better? You know?
That's big because I also have a lot of cases involving social media and sex trafficking, as well as the exploitation of kids. Like, what's happening a lot now is there's kids being catfished. I don't know if that's a term now that people use, but basically somebody puts somebody behind the screen, puts a picture of a beautiful girl, right? And she starts messaging or DMing this guy who's attracted to her, and she convinces him to send like nudes of himself. And then come to find out soon, that person who was supposedly the girl starts telling this person who sent the nudes, I'm gonna start posting these publicly if you don't pay me money, or if you don't do this, do that. So that's exploitation, and that's happening a lot. What's happening a lot is also these traffickers know that this is the social media age. Like, kids are on it, even young kids. So even things that seem innocent, like Roblox, I don't know, my kids are into that. I don't know what age they kind of stop being into that. Roblox, TikTok, these apps for adults that kids somehow find ways to get on. I have some cases involving that. And then they end up meeting with these kids and trafficking them. And the thing is, this is happening way more than people realize. And people don't realize sometimes how much is happening until it's too late and it happens close to home. People don't realize how sex trafficking is so prevalent, even right here in Palm Beach County, even right here. And it doesn't matter if you live in a rich neighborhood, not so rich neighborhood, if you are Hispanic, white, African American, doesn't matter, it can still touch you. It can still affect you or someone you know. They don't respect anything. These traffickers do not respect boundaries or social norms. And so what's happening is a lot now with social media. This is happening. There's also, and I'm really speaking from what I see on the legal front. What's happening is, like you said, how this girl's video for engaging in sexual acts was airdropped. A lot of these videos are being posted on these porn sites without the person's consent. So it's out there. I had a case once where this girl's like, somebody found me, like I had no idea this was out there. And it's out there, and once it's out there, it's very hard to get back because you don't know how many people actually have, you know, a version of what they posted. And so what I can say is just, I know it's hard nowadays because it's what's in, but just keep it clean on social media. Like, imagine if someone were to post or make public everything you're writing or sending. If you had that as like, okay, if this were to be made public, how would I feel about this? If you had that thought, trust me, your social media use, one, it would decrease by a lot. Secondly, you wouldn't be posting things that are detrimental to your well-being. So if you were to imagine that tomorrow this can become public, because it very well can be. You can be sending a picture to a boyfriend. That boyfriend may not be your boyfriend next year. And he may be mad at you, and he may want to show it to all his guy friends, or post it, or airdrop it. Like, I think just have that idea, like, okay, if this were to come out, how would I feel about it? And listen, if you don't care, that's a whole different problem. That's a whole different thing we have to talk about. But if you care, then don't post it. Don't send it. Don't take that picture. Don't, whatever it is, don't let this person record this video of you guys engaging in an intimate, what's supposed to be intimate between a married couple act, right? Don't do that. You can't control it. You can't control where it goes. It's like if I set a fire right now in this room, I can't control where it goes. Once I set the fire, that's it. And so I would see your posts, your DMs, whatever people do nowadays, because I'm like so out of touch, see that as if, okay, if it came out tomorrow, how would I feel? I think that's practical enough to kind of remember.
Yeah, no, it is practical. I mean, it's clear, you know, like clear how to represent that. And I want to close with this, you know, this final thing. I want you guys to get really personal, you know, with marriage. You know, why is it important to wait? You know, waiting for the right one, waiting for, you know, you find your married spouse, your spouse. You had shared something with me earlier about like a stat. I thought it was really cool. I want you to share that.
It's studied that 5% of women who had sex with, I think, 5 or more men, their marriages are most likely to fail and they'll get a divorce. And now there's only 2% of women who've actually waited to marriage to have sex. So.
Yeah, so I mean, for you guys are married, right? And you guys are flourishing in your marriage. Like, you know, can you share like the beauty of like your marriage and why it's like so important to be with your spouse, not just to anybody, but, you know, within that boundary?
Yeah, so me and my wife both come from very promiscuous backgrounds. You know what I'm saying? But I tell you what, man, when you want a godly marriage, right? When you want to be that head of the household, it feels good as a man to love your wife and to, you know what I'm saying, really care for her as the scripture says. Because, like I said in the previous video, man, like, God took that woman from my rib, bro. That's my rib. God gave her to me. And I am to care for her in such a way. And that, like, man, when a man gives that type of love to his wife, bro, and she reciprocates that love back, you know what I'm saying? It's beautiful, man. And, you know, we have to forgive all, because you know what, if we didn't forgive all the crazy things we did back then, you know, it wouldn't have worked, you know what I'm saying? And so that statistic that you shared, I don't know about all that. We're going to beat the odds on that one, man. You know what I'm saying? Because I know God gave my wife to me, and my wife knows God gave me to her too, man. And it's marriage is such a beautiful thing, man. When it's in the confines of the scriptures, you know what I'm saying? And to be that, you know, how Christ loves the church, right? To you know, nurture your woman, you know what I'm saying? To be there for her, to saturate her atmosphere with the word of God, and to keep her, you know what I'm saying, modest, as the scripture says, you know what I'm saying? Because when God gives you that woman, man, that's yours, you know? And keeping that whole thing covered up, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, when when God gives you that marriage, you know what I'm saying? When it comes time to, you know, get to that intimacy part, man, that's yours to unwrap. You don't show all that stuff on social media. That's mine, and that's beautiful between you and her. You know what I'm saying? And you guard that. You know what I'm saying? You cherish that. And, you know, I remember when I said I do to my wife, I was like, yo, I don't want to be your typical Christian. I don't want to be that, he a Christian, but he cheats on his wife. No, I want to beat all the odds because of I know the value my wife has, right? And man, we gonna beat them odds, man.
I love that. One thing I do want to say is, so my husband and I, when we met, we weren't virgins at that point. I think I was 24 when I met him, and he's 3 years older than I am. But when we did meet, we decided to wait until marriage, and we did. Successfully, we did, thank God. So I bring that up to say it's never too late. It's never too late to make that decision. And hopefully you partner with someone who is on the same page with you. Because if we would have been on two separate pages, that wouldn't have worked. Either I would have caused him to fall, he would have caused me to fall, or we would have just not been together. So we did wait until marriage, and it has blessed us. It's not to say, and we were talking about this earlier, like when you're in a marriage, you will go through things, and you're not perfect. You're not two perfect people, and there's something about your spouse that because you care so much, there's nobody who can like get on your nerves like they can. You know what I mean? Like, because you care. It's like a sibling. When you grow up with a sibling, like you fight all the time because you're so close. You're in the same home. You live together. You know, you're not here taking breaks. Like you have a friend. You may have a great relationship with a friend, but go ahead and move in with that friend, and you'll see how soon you guys will start to fight about the most mundane things, like, oh, you know, who left those clothes on the floor, the towel on the floor, who didn't put the toilet seat down. So like in the marriage, there will be times where it's difficult. But I think what's so beautiful is when you overcome those things and now your marriage is much deeper, has much more substance. It's not superficial. It's so easy to start dating somebody and things are like amazing the first few months. That's easy. You're trying to press him, he's trying to press you, you're trying to look good all the time. You know, but regardless of what Beyonce says, we don't wake up like this. Like we don't look like this. So for you to be able to see me in my worst times and still want to be with me, still choose to be with me, for me to, you know, it's kind of late now, but for me to drive home and know I have my husband there in my home, that's my best friend. Like you said, the true definition of marriage, if you do your best to carry that out, it is a beautiful thing. You have your best friend there who you can count on. If you're sad, you can talk to him or her. Like, some people think marriage is not worth it, or like you said, marriage is a piece of paper, or they step out in their marriage thinking the grass is greener on the other side, and you're missing out on something so much more beautiful, because God gave you that partner. God gave you that partner because we shouldn't do life alone, right? And so I just think marriage is a beautiful thing. And if anyone watching is in a marriage and is in the middle of something difficult, you overcoming that, it makes it even more beautiful. Because you can look back and say like, wow, like that was a testimony right there, and we made it. We made it. We've overcome it. And I'm telling you, there's nothing like it to know that you have that best friend, you know. And
That's right.
I think it's definitely worth waiting till marriage if you can, because you can avoid a lot of just things that happen when you're not celibate. But if you didn't, like I said, it's not too late. I don't want anyone to feel like they're being judged, because no one here is perfect. We've all done things that we probably don't want to say and air out. But I think it's just never too late. It's never too late.
Yeah, there's always redemption, and you can find, you know, there was this pastor that said is that every sinner has a past and every saint has a future, you know. So we all have made mistakes, we all have made decisions that we're not proud of, but thank God that we have grace. Grace is what keeps us going. Grace is what catches us when we fall. Grace is what sustains us where we're at. So just to understand that you're not being judged, you're being loved on, and we believe the best for you, anybody that's watching. So, Krisel, you're amazing. Thank you so much.
You guys are so awesome.
You did everything that you brought to this platform is amazing. I believe that someone that's watching is going to be impacted, that's going to be helped, that's going to be healed because of what you shared. And I know that God placed you here on purpose on this time for a reason. So thank you so much for sharing. So,
Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much.
yeah. Young in Faith family, hey, we're going to drop some resources for you down below. If you have any questions, please reach out to Young in Faith through DM or even through Krisel's Instagram. We're going to provide all that, again, those resources down below for you to get in contact if you need help or if you just need someone to talk to. We will be giving you those resources. So thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for Young in Faith's next episode. God bless.